everyone. It is so great to be here with you today in community for the annual Educator Collaborative Gathering. My name is Dr. Tracey Flores, and I'm an associate professor of language and literacy studies at the University of Texas at Austin. And I am here to share work that I have participated in and facilitated in with Alethea Cavan, who is a high school teacher at San Marcos High School here in Texas. And she could not be here with us for the session, but I am going to share the work that she has facilitated in her classroom and how we come together to this work. And so the name of our session today is called Funds of Knowledge, Drawing on Strengths to Cultivate Youth Writers. And this is a topic that is very near and dear to both of our hearts. We both identify as writers, and we both believe that all of the young people that we work with in school settings and out of school settings have important stories to tell and come to us as writers. And so this session is about really drawing on the assets and the resources of your students to support them as they continue to develop as writers and to empower them to share their voices and stories and histories. And so I want to start first by sharing some of the work that some of the young women that I work with during the summers in Somos Escritoras have created in our time together. And I am the founder and a facilitator of Somos Escritoras, which is a space for Latina girls to write, draw, and share their stories from their histories and from their lives. And it's a space where we support them in continuing to develop as writers, and we work to empower them to share their voice and their histories as a way to heal, as a way to sustain who they are, and as a way to bring about change as in the legacy of our ancestors. And this young girl, she, after some work with the book, Family Pictures, and after some time with the librarian at the Benson, where the Carmen Lomas Garza archives are housed at UT Austin, she created this artwork with great detail of quinceañeras that she has participated in, attended, of families and friends. And you can see all the details, so many different stories within this picture. You can see family coming together around cultural traditions. You can see the food that's being served. You can see relatives dancing. You can see the decorations. You can see kids playing. There is a lot of community coming together around this young girl as she has this really huge celebration of turning 15 and what it means to move from childhood to adolescence and then into adulthood. And this young woman that I worked with, she wrote this. Her name is Erika. She drew this picture after we had read and discussed Family Pictures, and after we had actually got a chance to look and visit the archives. It was during the pandemic and it was digital, and we put this all together to really think about the traditions, the culture, our linguistic resources in our homes and our communities. So this is called Quince Memories and Traditions Celebrated with Families and Friends. And I start here to root our conversation in Funds of Knowledge. And I want to share just a little bit more about who I am and who Alethea is as well. We both identify as Latina women, we both identify as educators, and we both identify as mothers. And we come to this work with all these different identities that we carry with us, with the desire to reclaim our histories, to reclaim our language as we're continuing to work on and develop our Spanish that was, taken away from us as young children. And we work to ensure that our young daughters grow up in a place where they feel proud of who they are, in which they have access to the stories, to many stories, but also the stories that they can relate to as young Latina girls, and that they continue to develop positive self-worth and self-identities. And so that's how we come to this work. And I met Alethea through the National Writing Project work, the local chapter at UT Austin. And from there, we cultivated a friendship and a relationship. And she's also a facilitator at Somos Escritoras in the summer, each summer that we host for young girls, for young Latina middle school girls. And so as we continue, I invite you to think about, how do you center students' voices and identities in your writing classroom? Whether you work with pre-K, kindergarten, all the way up to high school and beyond. How do you work to center your students' voices and identities in your writing classroom? And so this might be a time when you can pause the video and do some reflective writing. Get out your notebook, open a blank uh, Word document, and just kind of reflect into this. What are you doing to support your students' voices and identities in your classroom? And I want you to think about the things that you are doing versus what you're not doing, because there's a lot of good things that you're doing. And I know that we can be like, oh, I should be doing this and that. And that's not what I want us to think about. I want us to think about, what are we doing? And take some time to reflect on that, pause the video, and then we'll invite you to come back to it at the end of our session. And so our presentation and the work that we do is grounded in the deeply held belief that our stories are a resource. Our stories are what are shared with us through our elders, through our ancestors. They're passed along through the generations. They teach life lessons. They teach cultural traditions. They're a way of sharing, healing, the way to heal. They're a way to also speak as counter narratives as well, to push back on society's unfair stereotypes of us, or the narratives that are surrounding us. And we root the work in community cultural wealth, funds of knowledge, and culturally sustaining pedagogies as ways that we, share wisdom, share knowledge, share ways that we can resist unfair systems, oppressive systems, and ways that we carry these stories with us to help navigate all these different spaces of our lives. And so as we're talking about stories and storytelling today and centering culture, language, and identity, we really root the work not only in our own beliefs as stories, as healing medicines, but also in these theorists who have theorized stories as resources in a way that uplifts our communities and supports us in not only surviving, but thriving as communities of color. And so in thinking about supporting our young people in their writing, and really drawing on a funds of knowledge approach and looking at stories as a resource, and thinking about how you can draw on personal stories and personal histories as a resource for teaching young writers and for teaching writing, I want to share a little bit of some of the activities that we have done in Somos Escritoras that we've created and facilitated for young middle school Latina girls, and how we go through this process of having them really think about their funds of knowledge, those that knowledge that's shared from generation to generation, and also shared between children and adults, and how there's so much teaching and learning that happens in the home, and to really name those things and acknowledge those things as important tools that we carry with us, but also important resources for teaching and learning and writing. And so in Somos, what we invite the girls to do is we invite them to really think about their community and their families. And we ask them the following questions in English and Spanish. What has your family community taught you? So you're like the student, you're learning, you're receiving this knowledge. What have you taught your family and community? So you are the teacher. So what have you shared with your elders? What kinds of learning and things have you shared with them? How have you been a teacher? And then what knowledge can you share with others? And so in these questions, we invite them to think about the things that they've been taught and times that they've also been a teacher, because that funds of knowledge approach really also thinks about the reciprocal ways that we teach and learn at home, and the ways that knowledge is co-constructed in these very important and powerful ways. And then how can you share this with others? And we invite the girls to reflect on these questions, do some writing around it, share in partners, and then we do some sharing out. And so when we were on Zoom, that was via a Jamboard, so that we could, or Padlet, should I say, and that was so that we could kind of really co-construct this information together, construct these funds of knowledge, and really see similarities and differences, and see the many connections that we have with one another as well. And it also helps girls to really think about what's happening in their own homes, to think about their funds of knowledge differently too. And then once we had some time to reflect on it individually, share in partners and then share out, we then talk to the girls about like, here's what we're seeing in your funds of knowledge. And this is, based off the work of Louise Small and thinking about you as the young person, you as the person, the human being, and all the different things that you bring with you from your home, ways that you've learned to that you support your neighborhood and community, ways to help at home, ways that we communicate, ways to love and care for others. So we start to, from what they've thought about, we continue to co-construct this together and thinking about the storytelling, the ways that we learn to communicate, the ways that we learn to show respect, how we share. We're not just an individualistic type community. We really care for each other, how, the chores that we do around the house, the way that, we write, we entertain, the jokes, and we start to kind of name these and group these funds of knowledge and, thinking about what does this mean about me and who I am, and look at all of this wisdom that I carry with me from home and all these stories that are part of this teaching. And then we also share again in Spanish. It's the same themes, the same ideas in Spanish. And then once we've had some time to kind of name these things and start to think about them, we take the girls through a guided meditation. We always, in Somos Escritoras and in our writing that Alethea and myself do, we always are inviting the young people that we work with to create art, to sketch, to draw, because that's another way that we can tell our stories. And that also is rooted in this book, Family Pictures. Carmen Lomas Garza, she is an artist, and she has these beautiful detailed paintings from moments of her life that show the assets, the resources, the deep communal familial love. And she has these paintings and then the vignette that goes with it that tells the story. And so we always invite the girls, regardless of what kind of writing we're inviting them to compose or create, to draw. And so we take them through this guided meditation, and we invite them to visualize, to think about with their hearts and their minds, their homes and their neighborhoods. And it can be, I spent a lot of time growing up with my Nana Josie at her house. And so sometimes that's the neighborhood I go to, and I model that for them too. Sometimes I think about her home, or sometimes I think about, I've lived in 2 different homes growing up. And so sometimes there's one home I always think about on Marconi, which I'll talk about in a minute, or the neighborhood in general, because that neighborhood was very special where I grew up, that first home that my parents brought me home as a baby. And so we have them visualize, we give different examples, and I model, like, sometimes I think about my Nana's house, or sometimes I think about this house, like, because this learning, this funds of knowledge is it's not static, it's fluid, and it flows in and out these spaces of our lives. And so we invite them to think about, where are you? They can sketch that. And who's there with you? Who are the people? We give examples like your mom, your dad, neighbors, like who's there? They can sketch some of those. And then, what are you doing? What things are happening in this place? And that invites them to think about place different learning, like riding a bike, tending to the garden, these types of things. And then, what is your role? Why do you do this? So having them to think even more deeply about, here are the different spaces of learning, spaces of knowledge, places where knowledge is, being shared. What is your role in this? So we give them some time to really visualize these things with their hearts and their minds, and take some time to sketch this out. And I show my model. And like I mentioned earlier, the blue house in Marconi. My dad painted this house for my mom blue. He took her by the post office, and it was painted blue, and that's the color like that they decided for the house. And so my house is in the middle, the blue house in Marconi, La Casa Azul. And I was on 2343. I always remember that in my mind and my heart. And then I thought about the neighborhood. So my house is in the middle, because that's how I think about it. And then I think I start to think about who was there, my mom and my dad, and how we'd always sit at the kitchen table and, have family dinners together. And at that table is where I did my homework, where I watched my mother cook, where I waited for my sister to come home from school. where we would sit and eat and then sit around the table and tell stories. And the next door was the Harris family. And we were, I remember their two sons. They were very nice older boys. I was little and they were older, and they used to come play with us while their mom was at work, because she'd get home late, so my mom would bring them over and care. And so that was also showing how we care for our neighbors and we care for others and treat them like, like they want to be, like how we wanted to be treated. And sometimes she would cook for them and take care of them. My neighbor across the street, at an early age, I learned a lot about friendship and about losing a friend too. And so there's a lot of learning that happened here in this neighborhood, and how I learned, not only from my family, but from my community. And I saw this modeled about caring for your neighbors, and about being part of something bigger than just, my family. And so I have the examples here, and I talk through this with the girl. I tell the stories. I don't tell every story here, but I do tell some of the stories to kind of I'm also a writer in this space as well, but also to model for them what this can be for them as well. And so here's an example of one of the girls, and she shows here. This was over Zoom, and so this is a picture that she shared, and this was a 6th grade girl, and she is showing how they have puppets and family dinners. All this happens at the kitchen table. And so while their mom or their grandma or the women are, preparing dinner, the kids are playing, and they have a puppet show at the table, and they're making up stories right there. There's that storytelling happening as they're making puppets. They're actually making the puppets too. They're playing, they're cutting things out. And then their mother comes and serves them, and then they all sit down together and they eat and they enjoy this meal that was made with care and with love. And then they continue to share about their day, talk about the puppet show. And she made this comic strip to show all the different ways that they come together, and also the different learning and the way that they take care of each other. The older kids are there with the younger kids playing puppets, while the mom, the women are preparing dinner, and they all come together and share the meal. And it's not on here, but then they help, they take turns washing the dishes and doing different chores to make sure that all the hands are helping to clean the house. And that's something that they do every night. And she talked about how this is a way that they care for each other, and the way that they, learn different like routines and rituals together. And so this was after her thinking about some of the things that are happening in her home when she's a teacher, when her parents are teachers, and then when we did the guided meditation, and then it moved on to this. So I wanted to show that progression of how it's chunked up, and it kind of digs deeper, deeper, and deeper. And then eventually this will be taken to writing, and it was taken to writing. And so now I want to share a little bit about how Alethea took this into her classroom. And she works with newcomer emergent bilinguals at her high school. And she, the workshop that we designed for Somos, she redesigned it for her students to make it work for her community. Scaffolding language, scaffolding the different ways that she went through this process with them, so that they could access the writing and also write from their hearts, and center their identities and their stories and experiences as important resources. And so she started here with her home where she grew up in Rockdale, Texas. And she's very tied to her family and very tied to her roots. And she starts here and centers herself in the community that she cherishes, where she was brought home as a child, where she goes back now with her own baby for celebrations, where her mother and father are, where they pray together, they share meals together, they come together for the holidays. And this is like the house and the community that raised her, and who she is today is because of this. And so she centers this and shares this and tells the stories of this house and the people who are part of this place. Then what she does is she creates a visual. And you can see right here, this is a map of her home. And for this, she also drew on my map book, which has maps of different rooms of the house. And so this is the map of her childhood home. And you can see how she's labeled. She's sketched out and she's labeled different parts of the house. And she's labeled them and she's put some artifacts in there. And as she does this, she talks to her students about this. And you can see how she's also modeling the sketch with the label, which is also a good entry point into writing for our students at different places in their writing journeys. And so she models that for her students so that they can also try it out in their own maps or whatever they sketch out, and thinking about their funds of knowledge. And then she focuses on certain rooms and she calls it rooms full of gems. Gems, the stories, and the learning. And so she walks her students around some of her favorite rooms of her house. And she talks about how she can hear in her dad's room, she can hear the Tejano music playing from the radio. And you can see how she zoomed in on that for them. There's the boombox, the stereo, the love for Tejano music, and her dad's room. And so like she's talking through, like she's walking through the house and what this makes her think about and how that has cultivated a love and, being Tejana, being Latina, and the music of her home, the music of her heart. Then she goes into the kitchen where they shared meals together. And you can see it labeled there where different learning happened, the stories, them coming together as a family, those routines that are really important to her. And then also the living room where they would come together as a family. And at the bottom, you see it says honoring our ancestors, and they have an altar there that they have different saints there, different crucifixes and pictures of their ancestors so that they can always remember where they came from. And now at her own house, she also has one. So that's something that she learned from home about not forgetting where you came from and not forgetting those who came before you and always honoring them. So she walks her students through this and invites them to sketch and label or to stretch it even more depending on where they are at in their language and also in their writing and confidence as well. And so here are some examples of what her students have created. And so this is walking around the old road in Mexico. And in her students' work, they go into their community and they think about their homes. And they share from special moments from their childhood. And she asks them to let their writing take them back to the community and describes whatever comes to mind. A big question that she asks them is, what are you doing in this community? What are the members of your community doing? What do you love about this community? What ways are you contributing to this community? She also emphasizes small acts that we do to make and why this community is special. So she gives them more prompts to think about the different communities that they're part of. And in this one, the student's work, he goes to a community in his home country where he is in the city walking around the old road. His writing takes him to his mom's house in Mexico, where he talks about the party his friends have. He writes about missing the old year and sharing that his thinking takes him to his late mother. His mother was passed away. He even shares a unique detail of playing soccer on the road in which he draws in his visualization of his community. So you can see here the different, the community, and then the different things that he's remembering. His mother playing soccer, the colorful houses, that old road. And then you can see the labels for the different things on the post-it below that then turned into writing. So she scaffolded each part of this and let the writing take them where it would. And then in this next one, her community takes her to Aguascalientes. She identifies the specific beloved members of her community. She is taken to an afternoon enjoying the fresh air under a tree. She also mentions the chores that she does at her house, like sweeping. When identifying the why in her activities in her community, she says, I do this because it is the part that touches me and to help my mom. In her quick list of activities in her community, she recognizes the activities she practices and treasures, like a love of chisme, listening to stories and watching the movies. Even in her drawing, she identifies the members of her community and the actions they contribute within their community. And so you can see how Alethea has layered on the reflection, the modeling, and also the different entry points into sharing their stories. So the sketching and the labeling, and then the post it with more of the jotted points, and then taking it into more writing. And you can see how this young writer is really reflecting on her life and really seeing the richness and the assets that she comes from, the funds of knowledge. And then in this final one, laughing with friends in Iran, the student is taken back to to their community in Iran with friends at her high school. She notes that it's painful to remember her community because it makes her homesick and sad. Her community because it makes her homesick and sad, but she tries to ignore these negative feelings because remembering the community she cherishes helps her remember how wonderful her communities were. This student even writes towards the new community she immerses herself in, stating, I made a new version of myself. I'm expecting to do great things to happen and make awesome communities. And so you can see how she has sketched out different people who are important to her, and how even though she's looking back at laughing with her friends at Iran and it makes her homesick, it helps her remember good times. And then she sees it now she's also creating a new self, a new vision for herself around her new community. And so they write and they draw and they visualize, they label, they jot, and then they take things to writing. And every student has a different entry point into the process. And Alethea guides them through this as a writer alongside her students. And so I wanted to model how this work can look in out of school spaces and be taken into school writing and scaffolded in different ways. And also in Somos Escritoras, we also facilitate the space in English and Spanish. And so we invite the girls to, really think about their language and their relationship to their language, and encourage them to write in a language from their hearts. Because not all our students that we work with have access to bilingual education or to spaces where they are encouraged or feel confident to try. And so we want to thank you for this conversation today. And we hope that you take something away that you might want to try in your classroom, or any spaces that you work in with young people to center their voices and their identities and their languages and cultures and their histories. And here are some books that we recommend for your continued learning. And we also, I wrote about this activity with another mentor. This is from Voices from the Middle. And we walk through our process of creating the workshop, working with a librarian who zoomed in and showed the archives, showed her artwork, talked about it, tied it to funds of knowledge, how we also looked at the books, and then worked with the girls through the writing, through the drawing, sketching, illustrating process towards publication of a vignette. And so that's from Voices from the Middle from a couple years ago. And we thank you for this time. We thank you for spending time with us today. We know that you lead busy lives, and we honor you and we celebrate you, and we hope to hear from you very soon. Reach out if you have any questions, or if you would like to share any ideas with us, or share what you're doing in your classroom. Have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to hearing from you very soon. Adios.